I'm a big fan of resin printing, as you may be able to tell if you've been watching the channel recently, but it can be a bit of a pain, especially because you not only have to deal with the resin while you're actually printing, but you have to post-process your prints after they're done, which means taking them off the build plate and washing them in generally isopropyl alcohol to get rid of excess resin, and then using UV light of some kind to do that final cure and make them completely hard. Now, I'm going to be reviewing, as you could probably tell from the thumbnail, a solution that is supposed to make all of that process a lot easier. But before I do that, I thought I should show kind of where I'm coming from. This was my first wash and cure station that I had. This is obviously extremely homemade. I used a Rubbermaid container here filled with isopropyl alcohol and a homemade box that I have lined with aluminum foil. It's kind of gotten messed up since then. It used to look a little bit neater than this. I haven't used this in a while. And then I also had a UV light that I got from Amazon, and it would just use, UV light that was suspended over here somehow, and I just used that to cure my prints, and it did work. It was a little bit more on the manual side than I probably would have liked, especially the washing part. I had to have nitrile gloves on and kind of just rinse it all around with my hands and use a little brush and so forth to try and get all of the residual resin out of there. And honestly, I often found that it was difficult to get it all off. I did a little bit later upgrade this cure station, quote-unquote cure station, to one of these, the Elegoo Mercury. This is sort of a two-part thing. It's got a metal thing that is reflective inside, and then it has what I assume is a UV protective window there, and then it comes with one of these bases with a rotating stand that goes around when it's exposed to light. Here it's a solar kind of thing, and you just put your print in there, turn it on, and it'll count down 2-3 minutes or whatever you set it to, and cure things that way. This does work quite well. The main disadvantage of it is that it's very small, really, especially when you're talking about something like the Elegoo Saturn, which has a gigantic build plate. You just can't fit things in there. So I actually did end up continuing to use this for a while just because I couldn't fit everything that I was printing in there. For many cases, I actually just continued to use the sun as well, which does work as well, but it's dependent on the weather, of course, and it's not the greatest. I also upgraded this thing to a much larger one eventually, but none of these things were fantastic solutions. And so what I want to do today is show you Elegoo's solution to this and see if it's that much better than what I had been using. So this is the Elegoo Mercury X Wash and Cure Station, which they did send to me for review. This retails for $150, and that includes both of these units here, which are separate but are using the same AC adapter, so you can't put them too far apart from each other. We'll start by looking at the wash station. This consists of a large plastic tub, essentially, that sits on top of a plastic base, and it's not actually attached at all, as you can see here. The way it works is there is a spinning kind of impeller kind of thing in the bottom of the plastic tub, and there are magnets in the base that cause that to spin around when it's turned on, and that creates a kind of spinning vortex of alcohol, which would be a good name for a rock band now that I think about it. It has a snap-on lid, which is good because this thing can hold upwards of 5 or 6 liters of isopropyl alcohol, and you really don't want that spilling everywhere if you should happen to knock it over. Inside, it's got a metal bracket here, which is used to allow you to put the build plates from your 3D printers directly in there with the print still attached. Of course, I'm just showing you how it fits in here, but you can actually fit 2 of the Mars 3 build plates in there side by side if you should so desire, or you can actually fit the entire Saturn build plate in there as well, which is very handy for me and one of the biggest selling points, I think, for this station for me personally. It also includes this metal basket that you can use if you wanted to wash things that are not attached to the build plate. I haven't used this very much, but I could see it being useful in certain situations. To use it, you first turn it on by doing a long press on this front button here, which has a display integrated into it, and then you just turn the knob to whatever amount of time you want, and it'll start to count down, and it sort of spins around one direction for a little while and then turns and spins the other direction. I wasn't entirely sure how well this would work compared to my hand wash method, but I found that the prints I get out of the wash station are actually quite a bit cleaner and nicer than the ones that I did myself, so I'm pretty happy with that. It does take quite a lot of alcohol to fill up this station, though, so that's something to keep in mind. I also found that my large hollow resin prints can store a surprising amount of alcohol inside there, so you really have to do a good job of draining it before you remove it from the vat of alcohol. I used this wash and cure station for most, if not all, of my upcoming release of Visible Hut figures, and it worked quite well. However, I did have one problem right at the beginning. This is the little magnetic disc that spins around to make the vortex at the bottom of the vat of alcohol. After using it for the first 2 or 3 times, I found that there was a terrible noise, and it just stopped working. I asked Elegoo about it, and they gave me a couple of possibilities, both of which had to do with damage and shipping. I removed these screws along the bottom here at their instruction, and also here where the motor is, and found that right here there was a little grub screw. It's just like a little stubby screw that was supposed to be in there and had actually fallen out and was rolling around inside the case. So what I did was to just screw that back in and then obviously replace the other screws. And since then, it's been fine. But obviously, it's not really acceptable to ask your customers to open up and repair a machine like this. So I'm hoping that they will improve somehow the way they ship these machines to prevent that kind of damage from happening. Next, we'll look at the other half of this bundle, which is the cure station. It operates almost identically to the wash station in terms of how you select the duration of the cycle. It's got 2 tall pillars of LEDs and one on the bottom there underneath the clear acrylic rotating platform, all of which will help your prints cure in a relatively short amount of time. I've found this works really well. I haven't had any real complaints about how it cures my models, and it's much more convenient than trying to use one of my jury-rigged solutions or take it outside or something like that. It has an automatic sensor that will stop the curing cycle if you remove the lid. So you can't run it without the lid on, but you wouldn't want to do that anyway because the UV rays are harmful to your eyes. In conclusion, I'm really happy with how these two perform. I don't have any complaints about the cure station. The wash station, of course, I hope they will fix the issues with possible shipping damage. But aside from that, it does function well, although you do need to keep in mind that you need to use a lot of liquid to fill it up. And then, of course, you'll eventually have to dispose of that liquid somehow. So that's a little bit of a pain, but that's just part of resin printing, I think. I will say, however, if you're just getting into 3D printing, I'm not sure that it's necessary to get something like this right away. You can definitely get by with more homemade solutions like I showed at the beginning of the video for a little while, and you may find that that is perfectly good for you. But if you decide to kind of scale up and move on to a larger printer like the Saturn, you'll definitely find these to be very useful. I'll put a link in the video description to Elegoo's website for these if you want to know more. If you watched my review of the Elegoo Mars 3, you'll remember that I printed this model there and kind of showed how the individual parts were made. But I wanted to follow up and show you what the final painted model looked like, so I thought I would just put that on the end of this video. This, as I say, is the finished product, and I'm really happy with it. I, in particular, had decided to print this water part in a translucent blue, and then, use that to kind of recreate the water effect. What I did was to, after spraying it with a gloss coat to just make it shinier, I took white and kind of dry brushed it over the waves, and then used it just as it is, pure white at the tips of the waves. And it, at least in person, is quite an interesting effect. It's translucent, it looks like water. And I'm totally happy with how that turned out. And of course, we have the little tiny little sailboat here, which is something that really only resin printing can pull off, something this tiny. And the lighthouse there as well. Both turned out nicely. And then we have the big guy, Cthulhu. I don't know if we can see his wings. Mostly I did this just with a brush, as I tend to normally do, but I did use an airbrush to kind of tint his wing membranes and other parts of his body a kind of contrasting maroony color, I guess you'd say it is. And I'm also really happy with how that turned out as well. So, this is an example of the kind of thing that you can do with 3D printing and, resin 3D printing in particular. You can even read the little plaque that, you could read it if it was an actual language. I'm not entirely sure what that's supposed to say, but in any case, very happy with this, and just wanted to show it off. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in supporting the channel, like these people right here, including Angelica Brady and my other Palace VIPs on Patreon, check out the link in the video description.